Hello, today we are going to study the daily gospel for February 27 and 28. In today's session, we will be practicing learning how to make questions with the auxiliary verb do. Questions with do and does. Let's start this section of vocabulary. Let's learn 6 words that we will be listening to in our gospel today. Repeat after me, please. Disciples. How do you say discípulos in English? Disciples. How do you say sufrimiento? Suffering. How do you say ganar? Profit. Repeat these 6 words after me. Disciples, suffering, profit, often, mourn, bridegroom, bridegroom. What does disciples mean? What does suffering mean? What does profit mean? What does often mean? What does mourn mean? What does bridegroom mean? In order to work with our auxiliary verb do, we have to take a look at this table in which we see 4 columns. The one to the left, the column shows us how the verb do is conjugated. I do, you do, he does, she does, it does, we do, you do, and they do. As we can see in this chart, we use the auxiliary verb to help any verb make a question. The only exception is be, the verb to be. Because the verb to be, it, can make questions alone. We conjugate do with the given person. Do I, do you, does he, does she, does it, and add the main verb in base form, as we can see in this table. On the left, we can see the main verb have, which expresses an action. I have, you have, he has. And on the right, we can see the auxiliary verb at work, helping the main verb have. What do I have? ¿Qué tengo yo? What do you have? ¿Qué tienes tú? What does he have? ¿Qué tiene él? Very important to see how our auxiliary verb has the S, which we do not use in the main verb, because as the explanation tells us, we use the main verb in base form. At the bottom of the table, well, we can, even though we cannot see it, we know it's que tiene ella, que tiene él, que tenemos nosotros. What do you have, que tienen ustedes, and what do they have, que tienen ellos. Let's move on to the next slide. That's how we form the present simple tense. Affirmative and interrogative. The same happens with all other verbs in English. The only exception, as we said before, is the verb to be, which makes the question alone, on its own. Here, this table shows us the verb do as a main verb and the verb do as an auxiliary verb. Colors will help us distinguish which one is the auxiliary and which one is the main verb. On the left, the main verb do expresses an action. I do, you do, he does. On the right, we can see the auxiliary verb helping, the auxiliary verb do helping the main verb do. What do I do? ¿Qué hago yo? What do you do? ¿Qué haces tú? And very importantly, what does he do? ¿Qué hace? Again, the S is in our auxiliary verb so that we use the base form at the end of the question. What does he do? Does being our auxiliary verb, do our main verb. What does she do? ¿Qué hace ella? What does he do? ¿Qué hace? What do we do? ¿Qué hacemos nosotros? What do you do? ¿Qué hacen ustedes? What do they do? ¿Qué hacen ellos? That's how we form the present simple tense. On the left, affirmative. On the right, interrogative. Well, let's listen to our gospel for today, February 27th.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Apostle Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "The Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised." Then he said to them all, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will save it. What does it profit them if they gain the whole world, but lose or forfeit themselves?" The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, probably when I said today's gospel, I shouldn't have said that because in today's video, we listen to the gospels of today's February 27th and February 28th, which obviously tells us this is a recorded session. Let's move on to listening to the gospel for February 28th.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Apostle Matthew. Then the disciples of John came to Jesus, saying, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "The wedding guests cannot mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them, can they? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, in the gospel for February 27th, we can see an example of how does is working as an auxiliary to make a question. What does it profit? What does it profit them if they gain the whole world but lose or forfeit themselves? And in the gospel for February 28th, we've got the example of why do we and the Pharisees fast often. Here, we and the Pharisees is one subject, which is we, the person speaking, including the Pharisees. The person speaking here is John the Baptist's disciples who approached Jesus to ask him this question. So in our practice section, I'm going to ask you to pause your video and answer these questions. The questions will appear in a moment. What does it profit them to gain the world, but lose or forfeit themselves? Nothing. Jesus tells them they won't go to heaven. Why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast? John the Baptist's disciples were sincere and fasted because they were pious. Most Pharisees were hypocrites and fasted so people would see them. What does it profit me? What does it profit me if I win the whole world? If I win the whole world but lose my soul? Nothing. I need to pay attention to my salvation. Why do we Catholics pray and fast? Because these practices help us to become better Christians. So please practice, repeat the questions on their own, separated from the rest of the body of the slide. What does it profit? What does it profit them? Why do we and the Pharisees fast? Why do we and the Pharisees fast often? Often. What does it profit me? What does it profit me? Why do we Catholics pray and fast? Why do we Catholics pray and fast? Well, these are some examples of how we make questions with do and does. I hope you have enjoyed this lesson. See you next time.